The air smells of barley dust and burning cedar. A scribe kneels in a small room, pressing wet clay with a cut reed. His hand is unsteady. Outside the door, someone is running, and the sound does not stop. It is roughly 1190 BC in Ugarit, a merchant city on the coast of what is now northern Syria. He is writing to the king of Cyprus. The tablet will be found 3,100 years later in the ashes of this room. This is the last week of the Bronze Age world. What does it feel like to watch a world end? Not your city, not your kingdom, but every kingdom you have ever heard of, inside a single lifetime. 8 civilizations, 50 years, almost nothing left standing. We have always been told they were destroyed. The evidence says something stranger and much closer to home. The Bronze Age did not fall because it was weak. It fell because of the thing that made it strong. Picture the Eastern Mediterranean in 1300 BC. It is not a scatter of isolated kingdoms. It is a single system. Egypt under the pharaohs. The Hittite Empire across Anatolia, Assyria and Babylon in the east, Mycenaean Greece in the west. Cyprus, they called it Alatia, sitting in the middle, and the Canaanite ports strung along the coast between them all. Their kings wrote to each other constantly, and they did not write as strangers. In the Amarna letters, the king of Babylon addresses the pharaoh as my brother. They negotiated marriages. They complained about late shipments of gold. They sent each other doctors, and all of it rested on a metal that none of them could make alone. Bronze is copper and tin, roughly 9 parts to 1. Copper came from Cyprus, but tin is rare, and there is almost none anywhere in the Mediterranean. Isotope analysis published in 2022 traced the tin in one Bronze Age cargo to mines in Central Asia and in the Taurus Mountains. Some of it had traveled more than 3,000 kilometers before it ever reached the sea. Every sword, every plow, every cooking pot, all of it depended on a supply line that crossed the known world. Around 1300 BC, a ship goes down off a headland called Uluburun, near modern Kash, on the southern coast of Turkey. It sinks in roughly 50 meters of water and stays there for 3,300 years. When George Bass and Semal Pulak's team excavated it in the 1980s, they found the Bronze Age itself, packed into a hull 15 meters long. 10 tons of Cypriot copper, 354 ingots, each cast in the shape of an ox hide so that one man could carry it across his shoulders. 1 ton of tin, exactly the ratio needed to make bronze. Cobalt blue glass, ebony from Africa, elephant and hippopotamus ivory, ostrich eggshells, a gold scarab carrying the name of Nefertiti, and a ton of terebinth resin sealed in Canaanite jars. You would have smelled that ship before you saw it. Sharp and sweet, like pine and turpentine. Incense meant for temples 1,000 kilometers apart. Goods from at least 7 cultures. 1 hull, 1 voyage. This is the thing to hold on to. Call it the tin thread, the single strand of rare metal running from Central Asia to the Aegean, and from which every kingdom in this story was hanging. Cut the thread, and no one can arm a soldier or shoe a plow. The thread did not snap. It frayed. Pollen cores drilled from the bed of the Sea of Galilee, analyzed by Daphne Langut, Israel Finkelstein, and Thomas Litt in 2013, record a severe dry period beginning around 1250 BC and lasting perhaps 150 years. Not a bad summer, a drought that outlived everyone who was alive when it began. You can watch the pressure rise in the letters. Around 1210 BC, the pharaoh Merneptah records shipping grain to the Hittites, to the empire that had been Egypt's great rival a century earlier, to keep alive, in his words, the land of Hatti. A Hittite official writes to Ugarit demanding 2,000 measures of grain and adds a line that no diplomat writes lightly. It is a matter of life and death. The most powerful empire in Anatolia was asking a merchant town for food. Imagine that harbor in late summer. Dry rope, hot stone, ships still arriving, but fewer later, carrying less each time. Nobody panics. Nobody knows. There is no year in which the Bronze Age realizes what is happening to it. Around 1200 BC, the Hittite capital burns. Hattusa was enormous, 180 hectares of city behind 8 kilometers of wall on a plateau in central Anatolia, where winter drops below -20 degrees. Its last king was Suppiluliuma II. But when the archaeologist Jürgen Seeher re-examined the destruction layers, he found something that does not fit a sacking. The city had been emptied first. The royal archives, gone. The cult statues, gone. The treasure, gone. What burned was an abandoned shell. Grand, silent, already stripped. The Hittites did not lose their capital. They walked out of it in good order, carrying their gods with them. We do not know where they went. Then Greece. Around 1180 BC, the palace of Pylos, on the western coast of the Peloponnese, is destroyed by a fire so intense that it bakes the clay tablets in the archive room, which is the only reason we can read them at all. The storerooms were full of olive oil. The oil fed the flames. On those tablets, an administration is working normally. Wool counts, bronze quotas, ration lists for oxen with names. And then a group of tablets, scholars call them the OK series, recording roughly 800 men posted along the coastline as watchers, watching the sea. One tablet, cataloged as Tinan 316, lists offerings of gold vessels. And, in the reading most specialists accept, human beings sent to the gods. It is unfinished, written quickly, in a hand that changes partway through. It is tempting to read it as a last desperate sacrifice, and Thomas Palema and others caution that we cannot prove that. What is certain is that someone was making an enormous offering and stopped. Within a generation, the Greek world forgets how to write. Linear B disappears. Nothing replaces it for about 400 years. Here's what took historians most of a century to accept. Ramesses III carved the ending onto the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu in the 8th year of his reign, 1177 BC. A coalition out of the sea. No land could stand before their arms, he wrote, and then he named the dead, Hatti, Carchemish, Arzawa, Alashia, the sea peoples. For decades, that was the answer. It cannot be. The reliefs and the archaeology show those fleets carrying ox carts, women, children, household goods. That is not only an army, that is a migration. People already fleeing something, arriving in lands that were already failing. The sea peoples were not the cause of the collapse. They were the collapse in motion. Drought, earthquake, famine, rebellion, broken trade. No single one of these could have ended the Bronze Age. Colin Renfrew's term for it is systems collapse. Eric Klein calls it a perfect storm. Each kingdom had grown too connected to fail alone, and too connected to survive alone. The strength and the fragility were not opposites. They were the same thing, seen from different years. Egypt survived, barely. But in the 29th year of Ramesses III, the workmen who cut the royal tombs at Deir el-Medina stopped working. Their grain rations were late. They walked out, sat down outside the mortuary temple, and refused to move. It is the first recorded strike in human history. And it is not about ideology or kings or gods. It is about a supply chain arriving late. Now look at the object in your hand: cobalt, tin, tantalum, lithium, 4 continents, 60 elements, 10,000 kilometers of thread, and not one of us could rebuild it alone. You are living inside the same experiment. So far, it is holding. The scribe at Ugarit finishes his tablet. He sets it down. He does not label it the end. Nobody in this story knew they were the last generation of anything. They only knew that the harvest was thin, that the ships were late, that there had been no letter from the king of Alashia since spring. That is the one detail we can be certain we share with them. The end of a world does not announce itself. It simply stops arriving.